I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room when my phone rang. My daughter's voice was cold. "Mom, we're going to Europe tomorrow. I already sold your beach house and your truck. We needed the money. Bye." Her words landed like a hammer on stone, splintering the air around me. For a moment, I thought I had misheard, that my ears, dulled by age and grief, were playing tricks. But the line had already gone dead. I stared at the phone in my hand as the fluorescent lights hummed above me. Around me, strangers sat slumped in those green plastic chairs, coughing, leafing through magazines. Life moved on like nothing had happened, while mine cracked open in silence. I pressed my palm against my chest. 45 years of raising her, cooking meals, folding laundry, paying for lessons and summer trips, and now she discarded me in less than 2 minutes. There was no apology in her voice, no hesitation, just the efficiency of a business transaction. For months, I had believed she was checking on me out of love after her father's death. Now I realized it had been convenient, positioning herself for a grab. My throat went dry, but I did not cry. Strangely calm washed over me, like the sudden hush after a storm breaks. The nurse called my name, but I moved like a ghost. The doctor told me I was healthy for my age. I just needed rest and better meals. His voice floated far away. What good was health when your own child could carve out your heart? I nodded, thanked him politely, and left with a smile that was more armor than expression. Outside, Seabreeze's sun burned bright on the asphalt. According to Vanessa, I strolled to the bus stop, remembering that I no longer had a truck. That old Ford, polished every Sunday by John, its seat still holding his scent of aftershave and motor oil, gone with her signature, the thought might have broken me if not for a memory surfacing like a lifeline. 3 days before John died, he had pressed a manila envelope into my hands. "Keep this in your dresser. Open it only when you feel ready," he had said. I had tucked it away and forgotten in the fog of funeral arrangements and condolences. Now his voice returned with startling clarity, urging me to look. The bus rattled along the coast road. I stared out the window at clapboard houses, bait shops, and the strip of ocean glittering beyond. People hurried across crosswalks with their bags, living their own quiet tragedies and secrets. I thought of the years spent at the beach house, every summer afternoon when Vanessa was young, sandcastles, fireworks on the 4th of July, grilled fish on the porch. I thought of Christmas mornings when John lugged in the tree while she danced around in pajamas. To her, those walls had become nothing but cash to be liquidated. To me, they were a repository of our lives. When I stepped into my house, the air was heavy with stillness. The dining table sat with one empty chair across from mine, John's chair, pushed back just so. Dust gathered on picture frames. In the kitchen, an old ceramic mug with a crack down the side still waited on the counter, the same mug John used for his morning coffee. I touched it with trembling fingers and felt something shift inside me. I would not give Vanessa the satisfaction of seeing me collapse. If she believed she had left me powerless, she was mistaken. I sat in the living room, the late afternoon shadows stretching long, and for the first time since the funeral, I did not weep. Instead, I allowed myself to feel the strange steadiness of resolve. My eyes roamed over the photographs on the wall. Vanessa at 5 sitting on John's lap, both laughing, her hair full of sand from the shore. Where had that child gone? When had she become someone capable of speaking to me with such ice? The phone lay on the coffee table, dark and quiet. I could almost hear John's chuckle, that low rumble that comforted me on sleepless nights. He had always planned ahead, fixed the car before it broke, paid the bills a week early, and carried spare keys. Why would death be any different? It was not trivial if he had left me something in that envelope. He had known. He had seen what I had refused to admit about our daughter's hunger for control. I rose, each step heavy yet purposeful, and went to our bedroom. The dresser drawer groaned as I pulled it open. And there it was, exactly where I had hidden it months ago. The manila envelope, edges slightly worn, my name written in John's neat hand. I picked it up and felt the weight of its contents. Papers, more than one. My breath caught. I carried it to the bed and sat on the quilt we had shared for decades. The room was quiet except for the faint tick of the wall clock. The shadows grew deeper, the corners thick with twilight. My fingers traced John's handwriting. It was like holding his hand again. I closed my eyes for a long moment. If Vanessa thought she had stripped me bare, she had no idea of the man she had underestimated. Her father. He had prepared something. He had prepared me. I stared at the envelope as if it might breathe. My heart pounded, half in fear, half in anticipation. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked, and the cicadas began their nightly chorus. I tightened my grip, every nerve alive with expectation. What lay inside had the power to change everything. My chest rose and fell, the air sharp in my lungs. I leaned forward, lowering the envelope to my lap, and whispered, "John, guide me." Then I remembered the sealed manila envelope John left me 3 days before he died. I opened the drawer and found the manila envelope. My hands trembled, as if I were holding a secret that could burn me. The paper had softened at the edges where time had rubbed it, but John's handwriting across the front was still exact, the J and the C cut clean as a carpenter's joints. I sat with it on my knees a long time, feeling the heft, listening to the small domestic sounds the house still knew how to make without us air, through a vent. The clock's patient tick, a truck downshifting 2 streets over. I told myself to breathe. The room smelled faintly of lemon oil and the old quilt. I slid my thumb under the flap and broke the seal. Deeds slid out first. Thick pages stamped and notarized, full of legal language that looked like a foreign alphabet, until I recognized our names, dates, parcel numbers. An address on Gulf Road that was the beach house, then others I'd never heard of. Some certificates listed shares I didn't know we owned, statements with balances that didn't belong to a retired engineer and his homemaker wife. Not how I'd measured us for 45 years. At the end lay a letter folded into thirds, the paper creased like a map unfolded 100 times. I touched it like I felt a scar. My love began in a hand I could have traced from memory. If you are reading this, it means the Lord called me home before I could say everything that needed saying. Forgive me for keeping quiet. I did not want you to carry worry on top of grief. I read each sentence as if it were bread after a fast. He told me how, over decades, he had put away and invested the dollars neither of us could miss at the time. Bonuses, overtime, that tax return the year Vanessa got braces. How the market scared him until it didn't. How a friend at the plant taught him to read balance sheets. How he bought small and held long. He wrote about a company he set up, Robert Holdings, named not for himself, but for the grandfather who raised him from a single-room house in Indiana. He said it owned what we owned, a clean layer between us and the world, because he had seen what the world could do to old people who looked easy to take from. I stopped and pressed the letter to my chest. The bed springs creaked when I leaned back. Outside, the sky had gone soft, the heat easing out of the day. A little tag, paper-clipped to the last page, caught the light. White cardstock with a metal key taped to it, and in John's neat print, a number, 247. The tag kicked at some distant memory. Years ago, a day at the bank when he asked me to wait in the lobby and brought me a peppermint on the way out. I swallowed, feeling both foolish and protected. He had planned for rain and for a flood. "You know our daughter," he wrote. "You love her, as do I, but I have watched her tilt toward wanting what is easy more than what is right. I did not want her to bend you to that tilt. If you tell her about this while I am still alive, she will begin to love us differently, for the wrong reasons. So I ask you to trust me the way you trusted me with broken carburetors and leaky pipes. I invite you to open this only when you are ready to see that you are not poor, powerless, and alone." I read that paragraph 3 times. Part of me wanted to argue with him across time. How could our child turn the balance of love into a ledger? Another part whispered that he had seen clearly what I had refused to name. I looked at the deeds again. Some addresses I recognized by the sound of the street names. Others I didn't. A 20-unit building downtown. A small motel on the causeway. 2 houses inland. Tiny boxes on quarter-acre lots. The beach house, of course, whose porch John and I rebuilt the summer Vanessa learned to swim. A shiver moved through me. Not fear, not greed, but a steadiness I hadn't felt since I held his hand for the last time. On the nightstand, a silver bracelet lay in its dish. John gave it to me for our 30th anniversary. It was not expensive, but it was engraved inside with our wedding date. Before we left for church, I slipped it on the way I used to, a private promise to carry his voice with me. I turned back to the letter. If something has happened that made you open this, don't rush into the light with it. Let those who underestimated you keep underestimating you. Power doesn't always need to raise its voice to be heard. The house seemed to lean closer to listen. I thought of Vanessa's call in the waiting room, the way she had said, "Shame crawled into my collar." The letter did not scold me for any of that. It simply asked that I move with care now. I spread the documents across the quilt. The lamp threw a narrow circle of light. The addresses felt like coordinates in a chart I'd never been allowed to see. I ran my finger across the embossed seal of the holding company, the way you check a loaf for doneness. Robert Holdings, John's grandfather's name. I liked that. It meant the root ran deeper than us. My thoughts ticked through the practical. If the sale Vanessa arranged was fraudulent, could it be unwound? If the truck had been sold under a power of attorney I didn't remember granting, could that be challenged? I was not a lawyer, but I knew the value of good ones, and John had left me the name of a man in town he trusted, tucked into the back of the folder. Carter, with a number and a downtown address. I put his card by the phone. Somewhere between the deeds, I found a one-page note in John's hand that looked less like a letter and more like a checklist. Who to call first, what to ask for from the bank, what not to say on any recorded line. He had even written in that stubborn script of his, "Smile when they underestimate you." I laughed out loud then, a slight surprised sound. I could almost see him grinning in the doorway, hands in his pockets, waiting for me to come around. I traced the number 247 again on the tag and imagined a cold metal box in a vault, where our life was folded into neat envelopes, waiting for a woman who had been told she had nothing left. The sky outside the window deepened to the bruised blue of evening. I went to the kitchen, set water to boil, and took a cracked mug from the shelf with a hairline down the side that John never let me throw away. I measured tea and listened to the kettle fuss. The house breathed with me. At the table, I wrote a short list on a legal pad: the bank, the county clerk's office, and the title company whose stamp I had seen on one of the pages. I kept my handwriting steady. I spread the stack again, noting dates, signatures, and how everything was in order. John had never left a bolt loose in his life. I returned the letter to the bedroom and read the last lines at the window, my reflection floating over the dark yard. Use what I've left you to keep your dignity, and if you can, use it to teach. People learn best when life becomes very quiet and very clear. Teach, not punish. The words slid into place inside me like a key turning. I thought of Vanessa at 6, sulking on the porch steps after breaking a neighbor's toy and denying it. How John had sat beside her and said nothing for 10 minutes until she told the truth herself. He had always trusted silence to do its work. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and gathered the stack into a tidy pile. My hands had stopped shaking. The phone sat on its cradle in the next room, a simple thing suddenly heavy with purpose. The number on Carter's card was crisp and black. I picked up the receiver. My voice sounded calm when I heard it, as if the house were speaking through me. I dialed Mr. Carter. "I need to see you tomorrow. Urgently." Next morning, Vanessa sounded gentle. "We transferred your share. It's not much, but you can find something smaller." Her voice floated through the receiver like honey over glass, smooth but fragile. I held the phone to my ear at the kitchen table. John's documents spread in careful order across the wood. Outside, a cardinal hopped along the fence line, red against the gray morning. For the first time since her abrupt call in the doctor's office, she spoke with what could almost pass for tenderness. Yet I heard the stiffness behind it, as though she were reading from a script rehearsed with Eric. I kept my own tone steady. "I see," I murmured, while my eyes drifted to the embossed seal on one of the deeds John had left me. She told me that 30% of the sale price had been set aside for me, her words softening as if generosity could be measured by fractions stolen from the whole. "We want you to be comfortable, Mom. We'll help you find something smaller that fits your needs." Fits my needs. I let the phrase settle. After raising her, after decades of cooking dinners, keeping a home, patching the holes she and Eric left in their wake, she had reduced my life to something smaller. I pictured the cracked ceramic mug in the sink and the empty chair across from mine at breakfast, and I felt a hot edge press behind my eyes, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of hearing that in my voice. "That's thoughtful," I said evenly. "When are you leaving?" "We'll be gone 6 months, maybe longer if things go well." "Don't worry, Mom. We'll help you when we get back." She paused, then delivered her closing line, syrupy and hollow. "We love you so much." The call ended and I stared at the quiet receiver for a moment. My hand found the teacup beside me, its steam curling faintly in the morning light. I took a sip and laughed, not from joy, but from the absurdity of the entire charade. 30% of my own possessions, a mockery disguised as kindness. I logged into my bank account, curiosity prickling. The deposit was there, a tidy sum that might appear generous to any outsider, but I knew the value of what had been lost. They had sold the beach house for far less than its worth, quick cash at the expense of decades of memories. The truck had gone cheap, probably to some collector who knew precisely what he was getting. Vanessa and Eric had liquidated our history like a yard sale. Later that afternoon, I stood at the window, watching as they loaded their suitcases into a yellow cab. Eric strutted with 2 enormous bags, his watch flashing in the sun. Vanessa carried a designer carry-on, her hair perfectly smoothed. They looked like 2 teenagers off to summer camp, giddy with their escape. Not once did they glance toward my window. Not one wave, not even a nod. I pressed my palm against the glass, not to reach for them, but to feel the cool pain ground me. They were gone, laughing and kissing as the cab pulled away, their figures shrinking against the bright street. My neighborhood hummed on. Dogs barked, children pedaled bikes, sprinklers hissed over lawns. And I stood in silence, more alone than I had felt in months, yet more certain of what I carried. I turned back to the kitchen. The papers lay waiting on the table, a map of truths Vanessa had no idea existed. Each deed, each statement was a thread John had woven into a net strong enough to catch me even now. The letter echoed in my head. "Let them keep underestimating you." As I gathered the documents, I thought of the phone call she had made the day before. First, the cold dismissal in the waiting room, now the mock compassion of a 30% share. 2 sides of the same coin. My daughter had decided I was powerless. She believed she had closed every door behind her, leaving me with scraps. But she did not know that the walls around her still belonged to me, that every step she took in that apartment was on ground John had secured. I folded the legal pad where I had begun scribbling notes the night before. County clerk, title office, Carter's number starred twice, and slid it under the pile. A sense of calm crept through me, the kind that comes not from denial, but from clarity. My grief for John would never leave me, but grief for Vanessa had already begun to transform into something sharper. Not vengeance, not precisely, but the need to teach. The kettle whistled on the stove. The light shifted across the yard as shadows stretched from the oak. I thought of all the evenings John and I had sat on that porch, him reading the paper, me shelling beans or folding laundry. Our lives had been ordinary, steady, built brick by brick. To Vanessa, that was something to cash in. To me, it was the foundation under my feet. I let the steam warm my face, then set the cup down. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, lined, yes, but firm, the kind of face that had weathered storms before. My lips curved into a smile, thin but unshakable. The absurdity of everything had tipped me past despair into a new kind of strength. The house around me seemed to breathe, as if waiting for me to speak. I laid my hand on the stack of deeds, then whispered to the silence, "You think you left me with nothing, but you have no idea what's coming. You think you left me with nothing, but you have no idea what's coming." From my kitchen window, I watched their glossy suitcases vanish. They left me with nothing, or so they thought. The cab's taillights blinked once, then dissolved into the bright Florida street. I stood at the sink, hands braced against the counter, the faint smell of dish soap rising from the basin. The house hummed with its ordinary sounds, the refrigerator cycling, the clock ticking on the wall, but under it ran a new current. They had walked out believing I was beaten. They had no idea that the real work was about to begin. I turned back to the table where John's papers still lay spread. The embossed seals, the signatures, the crisp legal language were no longer just curiosities. They were weapons carefully honed by a man who had seen farther down the road than I ever had. My eye caught the card with Mr. Carter's name, the lawyer John had trusted. I picked up the phone and set the meeting. Downtown Seabreeze was all palm fronds and low stucco buildings. The salt air carried on every breeze. Carter's office stood inside an older brick building, its marble floors scuffed from decades of traffic. I climbed the stairs, the manila envelope pressed tight under my arm, my heart hammering not with fear, but with resolve. He greeted me with a firm handshake, the kind that said he dealt in facts more than sentiment. His brows rose when I placed the envelope on his desk and slid the documents across. He read silently for several minutes, flipping from deed to statement to John's holding company records. His expression shifted from surprise to something close to admiration. "Mrs. Collins," he said at last, adjusting his glasses, "your husband was brilliant. These papers are in order. You are the rightful owner of every property listed here. That includes the beach house that your daughter attempted to sell." The words steadied me. "So I can undo it?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but it's not immediate. The buyers acted in good faith. We must void the sale, return their funds through escrow, and file motions with the county clerk. It's a process, and they may push back. Undoing a sale is harder than making one." I sat straighter. "Do it. Quietly. I don't want Vanessa to know until it's finished." He tapped a pen on his desk. "I understand. And there's more. I've looked into Eric Hamilton. He has taken out multiple loans, some of them using your daughter's signature. Several documents appear to be forged. If pressed, the banks will come after both of them." My stomach tightened, remembering the papers Vanessa had shoved in front of me months ago, papers I had signed in the fog of grief. And if those signatures were obtained under deception? Then we can challenge them. We may even be able to freeze Eric's assets before he sets foot back in the country. Silence settled between us. Outside, traffic murmured along the boulevard. I thought of Vanessa, laughing as she wheeled her suitcase toward the cab. She believed she was untouchable, that I would shuffle into some small apartment while she lived abroad with money scraped from my memories. She did not know her husband was dragging her into a pit of debt with every forged line of ink. I leaned forward, folding my hands on his desk. "No names," I said firmly. "I don't want her to know any of this is happening. She learns when it's too late." Carter studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "As you wish. I'll start the paperwork today." I left the office lighter than I had entered. The afternoon sun threw long shadows across the downtown sidewalks, and gulls wheeled overhead. For the first time since John's death, I felt as though I was walking with him again, his hand at my elbow, guiding me into a battle he had already prepared. The following weeks unfolded in a strange rhythm. By day, I played the part everyone expected of me. The widow left behind, neighbors offering sympathetic nods at the grocery store, Aurora bringing a casserole and clucking her tongue about young people these days. I accepted their pity with a smile and kept my secrets folded tight. By night, I spread papers across the kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear as Carter updated me. Escrow accounts were refunded, and the buyers were mollified with compensation. County clerks filing corrections, stamping "avoid" in thick red ink across fraudulent deeds. Each call built the scaffolding of a new reality Vanessa would never have dreamed existed. I walked past the beach house one afternoon, the cream-colored siding catching the sun, pots of geraniums still perched by the door from the short-lived buyers. It looked the same as ever, as though waiting for John to step out with a plate of grilled fish. My throat tightened, but I did not cry. The house was mine again, not by inheritance but by battle. Carter's calls grew darker as he traced Eric's loans. "He's up to his neck," he told me one evening. "Private lenders, credit cards maxed out, even payday advances. Several forms bear what we can prove is a forged version of Vanessa's signature. She'll be dragged under with him if the banks pursue it. I set the phone down and stared at the empty dining chair. My daughter had chosen a man who would use her name as collateral and sell her illusions until there was nothing left. And she had decided to cut me out, believing I was disposable. I could almost hear John's voice. Let them keep underestimating you. That night, I wrote in my journal, words I hadn't put to paper in months. They think I am powerless. They are wrong. Power doesn't shout, it signs. When I closed the journal, the house seemed to breathe differently. The cicadas outside sang louder, and the air through the open windows smelled of salt and cut grass. I felt the weight of the wine-colored dress hanging in my closet, the one John always said made me look strong. I imagined wearing it when I stood before them all, the papers in my hand, the truth undeniable. The weeks passed, mail was piled in the box, and most of it was junk. But inside my kitchen, a different stack grew. Certified copies, stamped deeds, notarized affidavits, each one was a stone in the foundation of my quiet revenge. I moved through my days deliberately, washing dishes, watering the geraniums on the porch, all while knowing I was redrawing the map of our family. By the time Vanessa returned, the world she thought she owned belonged to me, as it always had. By the time Vanessa returns, the map of this town will be redrawn, and I'll be holding the pen. Word spread. Eric's loans collapsed. Vanessa was flying back alone, sunburned by shame, not by the Mediterranean. The news arrived the way news always did in Seabreeze, through whispers on porches, murmurs in the grocery line, the slow drip of neighborly chatter. Aurora was the first to tell me, her eyes wide as she leaned over the hedge that divided our yards. He never had a return ticket, Maggie, she said, her voice pitched low like it was a sin to say it aloud. I was rocking on the porch when a cab pulled up the day she returned. Vanessa stepped out slowly, dragging a suitcase with one broken wheel. She looked nothing like the woman who had sailed away weeks earlier in designer clothes and sunglasses. Her face was pale beneath the tan, her eyes shadowed. The corners of her mouth trembled when she saw me. For a brief second, she seemed like a little girl again, stepping off the school bus with scraped knees. "Mom," she whispered. I rose from the chair, keeping my expression calm, almost neutral. "Welcome home." She gripped the porch rail as though steadying herself. "I don't have anywhere else to go. Please, can I stay?" 100 responses pressed against my lips. I thought of her words in the doctor's waiting room, how easily she had erased me. I thought of the 30% she had tossed me like scraps. But I also remembered John's letter. Teach, not punish. The lesson had to come through living, not through my anger. "This door is open," I said, "but not how you remember." Relief crumpled her shoulders. She followed me inside, dragging her bag over the worn wood floor. Upstairs, her old room smelled of dust and lavender sachets, long faded. She unpacked slowly, folding once precious dresses that now looked wrinkled and cheap. I left her there, knowing humility was already at work. That evening, we sat in the kitchen. I made meatloaf and green beans, the kind of dinner I put on the table every week. Vanessa barely touched her plate. She kept her eyes on the table's wood grain, avoiding my gaze. "I'll find work," she said finally. "Anything. Just I can't be on the street." True to her word, she tried the next morning. She came home with blisters on her heels and rejection slips in her purse. "No one wants to hire someone with depths like mine," she admitted, dropping onto the couch. "They check your credit, Mom. They see the lawsuits. No one believes me when I say I didn't sign those loans." I poured her a glass of water. "Then you'll have to keep looking. Something will open." Days stretched into weeks. One night, she shuffled into the kitchen wearing an oversized t-shirt, her hair pulled back in a rough bun. "I got a part-time job," she said, voice hollow. "Cleaning offices at night. Pays almost nothing, but it's work." I studied her face, searching for bitterness. Instead, I saw exhaustion edged with relief. "That's good," I told her, sliding a plate of cornbread across the table. Honest work never shamed anyone. Her first shift left her bone-tired. She leaned against the counter, describing the older woman who had shown her how to mop floors faster and stretched her back so it wouldn't ache. One name stuck with her. Mrs. Johnson, 60 years old, has been in that job for 2 decades. She told me there are 2 kinds of people who end up cleaning offices, Vanessa said, biting her lip. Those who never had chances, and those who wasted the ones they had. And what did you tell her? I asked softly. Her eyes shimmered. That I wasted mine. I reached across the table, not to rescue, but to steady. Then you know where you stand. Tremaine cleared her throat. Still, temptation lingered. A few nights later, she stood in the kitchen, her voice low. Mom, could you lend me just a little? Enough to pay one creditor. They're threatening to take me to court. I dried my hands on a towel and met her eyes. No, Vanessa, not like that. Money handed over without change is just fuel for the same fire. If you need help, we'll write it down, make a plan, earn, repay, account for every dollar. She swallowed hard, shame flashing across her face. Then she nodded slowly. All right, I'll try it your way. That was when I saw the crack in her pride widen into something more useful. For the first time in years, she chose work over shortcuts. The weeks etched themselves on her. She came home with swollen feet, her palms raw from chemicals, but her voice steadier. She began to budget her meager pay, even saving a few bills in an envelope she tucked into her drawer. I would hear her humming sometimes in the kitchen, a tune from childhood summers at the beach house. Aurora noticed too. One afternoon, she knocked on my door, balancing a pie. She looks different, she said quietly as we sat on the porch. Not just sad, humbled, like she's learning something real. I nodded, watching the light fade over the street. John had always believed silence could teach louder than words. I wondered if he was watching now, nodding in agreement. Later that night, Vanessa placed her small envelope of savings on the kitchen table. It's not much, she said, but it's mine, earned. I smiled, though my throat ached. That's worth more than you think. As she climbed the stairs, I lingered in the kitchen, running my hand over the worn grain of the table where so many meals had been shared, so many arguments fought. My daughter was not yet redeemed, but she was finally walking a road that could lead there. And for the first time, I let myself believe she might come back, not as a child needing rescue, but as a woman who had learned. She nodded through tears. For the first time, she chose work over shortcuts. Betrayal by your own child cuts deeper than almost anything else, because it strikes at the place where love should feel safest. I learned that no matter how much you give or how many decades of sacrifice you pour into family, love can be twisted into entitlement if boundaries are not set. My daughter sold the home where her childhood laughter still lived and thought she had left me with nothing. Yet what she truly left behind was her dignity and connection to the very roots that made her who she was. At first, I wanted to crumble, but I discovered that silence and patience are stronger than shouting. By keeping still, I let her walk herself into the consequences of her choices. Watching her return broken, with depth and shame pressing down on her, I realized that sometimes life is the harshest teacher. My role was not to take the pain away, but to let it teach her. Dignity is not about the house you live in or the truck you drive. It is about knowing your worth even when others forget it. Family betrayal hurts, but it does not erase your value. I chose to stand tall, not through revenge, but through truth revealed at the right time. When the community saw the deeds and heard the facts, justice did not need fire but light. Forgiveness, I also learned, is not about pretending nothing happened. It is about drawing a clear line. You may step back across it, but only with respect and responsibility. By setting conditions, I allowed my daughter to rebuild, not by handouts, but by honest work and service. In this way, I gave her back her chance at dignity without letting her trample mine. The beach house became more than a property again. It became a place of healing for other women abandoned and betrayed. That is the most significant victory, turning personal pain into shared restoration. The moral is clear. Betrayal can bruise the heart, but it cannot break the soul that knows its worth. Family may wound us, but we choose to carry scars as shame or strength. Have you ever experienced something like this? Share your thoughts below. If you loved this story, type number 1 and subscribe to Auntie Tales to hear the next one. And remember, sometimes the quietest power is the one that simply refuses to be erased.